بتقوى الله فإنها حصن حصين. What is happening throughout the world within the past few weeks is something that is heartbreaking, to say the least. Indeed, it's heartbreaking to see all these people suffer throughout the world, wherever they may be. And it's also saddening the moral duplicity by countries that promote democracy and human rights being silent on issues in Palestine, the atrocities committed against the people in Gaza. And we also see, as journalists get into this place, we see the blatant lies, the gaslighting. We also see the way the people have been very resilient in these areas. And indeed, I ask myself the question that when I complain about the very smallest of things, whenever it's too cold, I complain it's too cold. Whenever it's too hot, I complain it's too hot. Um, and then I look at these people and I wonder, they have nothing. And I'm so grateful for being here, for having heat, for having lighting, for having electricity, for having food and water. It's really a point of reflection for myself to be grateful for what I have. And when we look at what's happening around the world, to really thank God for where we are, for what we have. Indeed, you look at the images coming out of there. People, despite losing everything, are still thanking God. So it's a lesson for me learned from this whole situation to be grateful for whatever I have. But what's also interesting is how people in history also, how people have been oppressed in such ways with such atrocities. And how is that done? Despite people, we had World War One. After that, there was a sort of development of the UN, and there was a sort of consensus that it shouldn't happen again. But yet we had World War Two. So it keeps on repeating itself. And one of the ways this is done is by undermining the other, by dehumanizing the other. And it's done by means of language. So we find, for example, the Nazis used the term vermin against the Jews. And they justified. And by doing that, they are now morally absolving themselves from these people. These are less than people. They are vermin. They need to be exterminated, which is wrong, of course. But they employed this language. And they, by employing the language, they were able to justify doing all these atrocities. We find this in other places in the world. We find in Rwanda, the Tutsis were described as cockroaches, and that resulted in a huge genocide. What do you do with cockroaches? You crush them. And the use of language has been used to dehumanize people, and by doing that, they get a moral sort of justification in doing wrong, in oppressing, in committing genocide. Likewise, we see this has happened in other instances also. And also today, in the current crisis, the current genocide that we have seen unfold before us, where the Palestinians are likened to half animals, according to the defense minister of Israel. And also within the school system and the language that is used, Arabs are seen as dirty, vile, and by doing this, it justifies doing wrong. We also see in history the colonialists, when they went to different places, they went and they justified the actions that they were doing by saying that we are civilized and they are uncivilized. But if you look at history and you look at the history of indigenous people, their civilization, their culture is one that is very rich. Again, this is language being employed to justify wrong being done on another. And by utilizing the language, they're able to sort of comfort themselves that we all innately know that it's wrong. We look at the story within the Quran also, which alludes to this psyche. where Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, when his brothers come to him for the second time with their younger brother Binyamin, Prophet Yusuf makes a plan, and he places the king's cup within the sack of Binyamin. As the Quran mentions, where caller calls out, Antum sariqun, you are thieves, stop. And they ask, Mada tafqidun, what are you missing? And there's this whole conversation that's going on. Nafqidu su'al malik. We are missing the cup of the king, and whoever gives it will get a reward. So they go look at all of these sacks until they come to Benjamin's, and in that they find the king's cup. Now the brothers of Yusuf, who have plotted the killing previously of Yusuf and then putting him into the well, قالوا, they say, إن يسرقوا فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. If this younger brother of ours has stolen, his other brother has also stolen, i.e. Yusuf. Now Yusuf is there. And the Quran says, فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يُبْدِهَا لَهُمْ. Yusuf thinks in himself without telling it to them. قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرُّ مَكَانًا وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا تَصِفُونَ. You are in a very bad situation, and Allah knows what you're describing. Now what's happening? Now they know that they've done wrong, but to morally comfort themselves, they're justifying some sort of actions, some sort of wrongs, falsely accusing also, by keeping themselves calm, keeping themselves sort of happy that they may get away with something. And we do this sometimes. We may not be committing genocides, um, but within ourselves, when we do something wrong, sometimes we may justify. We may say that, oh, that person did wrong to me, so I may do wrong to them. How do we understand what's going on? We need to be very aware of what's going on within ourselves. We need to introspect and look within ourselves and see why am I doing what's wrong? And we know intuitively that something that we're doing is wrong, but we mask it with these justifications. Another way people mask is by peer pressure. Allah also talks about this, where we follow a certain creed, we follow a certain thinking because of other people, or because of our family, or because of community, or because of elders. وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً, as the Quran says, قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا وَاللَّهُ أَمَرَنَا بِهَا. When they committed wrongdoing, they say that we found our fathers doing that wrong. قُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ. Allah does not order us to do indecency and wrong. Within ourselves, we have that moral guide, we have that compass, that we know what is right and what is wrong, and we just need to listen to this intuition. And furthermore, the Quran says, يَوْمَ تُقَلَّبُ وُجُوهُهُمْ فِي النَّارِ يَقُولُونَ يَا لَيْتَنَا أَطَعْنَا اللَّهَ وَأَطَعْنَا الرَّسُولَ. That on the day when a certain group of people are in the hellfire, they say, oh, if only we had followed the Prophet, and if only we had followed Allah. وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّا أَطَعْنَا سَادَتَنَا وَكُبَرَاءَنَا فَأَضَلُّونَا سَبِيلًا. So they say that we followed our elders, our fathers, and they have misguided us. What have they done? They have masked their moral intuition. They have masked. Sometimes we know something is right, but because others are doing it, because someone big is doing it, we tend to mask it. And again, there are many such instances like this. Another way we justify morally wrong actions, or sometimes what we do is, rather, when we are faced with a moral quagmire and we have to revisit our beliefs, we tend to do what's known as cognitive dissonance, where we tend to justify a certain action, or we tend to read a certain thing in a different way. And we see that happening today also. When pictures are being displayed of dead babies in hospitals, justification. Oh, it was just Hamas or something like that. You know, there's cognitive dissonance where there's clear evidence that something wrong has happened. And likewise in our lives, when something wrong happens, sometimes we justify, and we may mask certain things by justifying and saying, no, this is a different. And we see this in doomsday cults, for example, when the day has come for the world to end, and that day comes and goes, they justify it. Say, oh no, maybe something else that's happened. There's something behind this. Cognitive dissonance. And this cognitive dissonance shows that there is incongruence within ourselves. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, as the Quran says, when it is said to them, do not cause corruption in the earth, قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. What do they say? We're not causing corruption. We are good doers. We're doing good on this earth. We will justify the wrong that we're doing. And although ultimately this is happening externally, but this is also happening internally, and I need to be cognizant of that. And how do I be cognizant of these small specks of thought that are going on within myself? I need to be self-aware. I need to be aware of every action, every thought, every belief that I have. But it's easier to go through my day or to go through my life without being cognizant. It's easier. And it's easier to do that doesn't mean it's right to do that. And we know we feel these pangs of pain within us that are pointing us towards our intuition or towards something that's right, but we mask that. We need to be highly aware. We need to take time out and look within ourselves. The other thing, perhaps, which will help is empathy. When we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, when we get angry, there perhaps is something within myself. I'm tired or I've gone through a difficult day and I snap at someone. When someone else does it at me, I will justify having a go at them without me putting myself in their shoes. So again, we need to be empathetic to understand what's going on in other people's views, to get their perception. And of course, there needs to be accountability. I need to be accountable, and one of the ways to do that is to get a friend to ask, if I am in a certain situation, maybe perhaps they can help me see another angle that I don't have. As the hadith mentions, Man lam yuhasib nafsahu falaysa minna. Whoever does not account for himself is not from us. So it's really important to have this muhasabah, to have this accounting of our own selves. If not by myself, then buddy up with somebody to do that. But all these things help us to be aware of any wrong that we may do, any justifications, any diversion from this moral intuition that we all have as human beings. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين أما بعد أوصيكم عباد الله وأوصي نفسي بتقوى الله فإنها حصن حصين. I exhort myself and I exhort all of you to be God conscious, for that is a strong fortress. Being God conscious means being aware, first of all, of what's going on within ourselves. Now, what happens in difficult situations, as we see throughout the world, and within our own lives and within our past, is trauma. And trauma is described as a psychological wound that impacts the individual's emotional and physical well-being. And it has consequences too, if not looked at, if not addressed. And we look at this in history. A group of people is oppressed. They go to a land, kick out another people, and cause them trauma from the trauma that they have had. And studies have been done pre-2005 where they looked at the most traumatic children, children who shows the most signs of trauma. And they found that in Gaza is where there was the highest level of children having trauma. So they're in situations where they're in open air prison, oppressed, there are checkpoints all the time. All this is adding up. And then what do you expect? A sort of explosion. So trauma is something that is very real, and trauma is an individual, but it can also be collective, and it can also be generational. So it's passed through generations. We see this with people being expelled from one land to another, where there is this trauma carried and passed on, perhaps in style. Some have posited, perhaps in genes. But we know for sure that it can be transmitted in our actions, in the way we upbring children. So we have trauma in whatever way we may have. And if we don't address that trauma, it then transfers to others. And that then becomes a cycle. So it's very important for us to be cognizant of that, to be aware of what is going on, how I feel. Have I undergone something traumatic in my life that has affected me and is affecting me? And how do I deal with that? And if I need professional help, then I should. There are many tools out there that I can employ. And indeed, one of the things as an outcome of this is, one of the ways paths someone can choose is to be resilient, to come out of that trauma. It's to bounce back from adversity, trauma, tragedy. We see this happening, and it baffles the mind sometimes when people who have lost everything are there thanking God. They have nothing material, and yet they're there thanking God. We look at Lady Zainab, for example, where she goes through experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma. Yet she comes out with saying that I see nothing but beauty. So we do have this opportunity of bouncing back from trauma, of learning from trauma, from accepting what's going on, and without fighting what's going on, accepting it and building on it. And many an instance in the Quran we can learn from. وَأَيُّوبْ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِّيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Ayub is going through this. He undergoes trauma. He bounces back. وَنُوحٌ when Nuh calls out, he calls out to his son, وَهُوَ فِي مَعْزِلِ يَا بُنَيَّ ارْكَبْ مَعَنَا. He's losing his son. He undergoes a form of trauma, and he deals with it. And we see the story of Yusuf, which we just spoke about. Yusuf undergoes trauma from his own family, who plotted to kill him. He's thrown into a well. As a child being thrown into a dark place, you can just imagine what sort of trauma the child goes through. But in that well, after that well, he comes out. He rises up the ranks, and what happens? He's thrown back into jail. He's thrown into jail. He's gone up, down, up, down. And in that point in time where he is in jail, and sometimes we all go through instances where we are up, we go down, and we think that we won't come out of that. But Yusuf, even in this situation, he has some guiding principles that help him through this journey. One, he knows that there is a God out there, and that God is there to help me, that I need to trust in him. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever trusts Allah, he is enough for him. Yusuf, and we put in the situation where it seems everything is so dark and constricted and nothing's going to happen. But if we place trust in Allah, فَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek help how? By having patience. What is patience? Patience is not tahammul, just carrying it on your shoulders. Patience is accepting the situation, acknowledging where you are, and knowing that there is a way forward. فَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek help with patience and prayer. We know the benefit of calling out to the beloved. We know the benefit of chanting out the names of God. And the studies done on the effect of stress on the effect of meditation and dhikr on stress levels. We find that they reduce them significantly. So all this is being presented as a toolbox for us, if you want to put it that way. Now, of course, there are many other tools that we can use, and we should refer to professional help if we need that. We see the Prophet, for example. He is taunted, he is laughed at, he is mocked at. Allah tells him, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. We have given you plenty, abundance, right? In our lives, we look at it, we have so much. If we look at what we have, we'd be so grateful to God as opposed to looking at what we don't have. And likewise, we find in the life of the Ahlul Bayt, Lady Fatima alayha salam, where we remember her death for so long. But what about her life? And so much beauty in the way they lived, the Ahlul Bayt, and at each point being grateful to God. So there's all these things that are within us that we have, that we can utilize to employ and be grateful and become better individuals. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ ذِكْرًا كَثِيرًا. Remember God immensely. And having one of the very important things that really helps, particularly when you undergo trauma done at you by someone else, is letting go of that. When Yusuf alayhi salam comes back, where he is in this position of power, and his brothers come to him after seeing what they've done, and after putting him in the situation they put him in, he says, "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm." There's nothing upon you. Why carry that weight? What benefit will that be to Yusuf, or in your lives? What benefit is carrying that in my heart? Forgive, forget, and get on with your life, and become like these individuals. We pray to Allah to help us reach this situation where, whatever situation we're in, to make us introspect, to learn from the situation, and to become better individuals. We pray to Allah for all those who are being oppressed throughout the world, in Gaza and wherever they may be, to elevate their oppression. We pray to Allah for everyone who is suffering in whatever form they are throughout the world. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد المصطفى. اللهم صل على علي المرتضى وعلى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. اللهم صل على أئمة المسلمين عليهم السلام. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات، إنك مجيب الدعوات، إنك قاضي الحاجات، إنك على كل شيء قدير.